Lawyers of Reddit, when was your how the hell am I going to defend this guy moment? This guy wanted custody over his children after a divorce and his wife was accusing of abuse, physical. He was asked if he had ever abused his wife and he straight up said yes. But only when she annoyed me or something along the lines of that. I was ready to straight up leave the courtroom and laugh my ass off. This was like 6 years ago and I've forgotten about it until now. Thanks for the reminder. Cough. When they came in with blood on their shirt. They were convicted for murder. The blood wasn't even for the victim he had apparently killed. Welp. As a student I was involved in the case of a double murderer who definitely did it. And did it basically for fun. Everybody in the courtroom knew this guy had to go away forever. That included his parents. The defense team's focus was on A. Challenging the Crown prosecutor's evidence to make extra sure the inevitable conviction would stick. B. Making the best possible argument for leniency to reduce the possibility of a successful appeal. Mission accomplished. The guy got a double life sentence, aka 50 years, with 32 years non-parole. And the judgment was worded in a way to ensure that he'd only ever be released to a high security institution. No appeal. The guy I was defending had raped a kid. While the DA was presenting the evidence he became physically aroused and excused himself to go to the restroom and obviously jerk off. I could have broken a chair over the guy's safe. Never met more of a low-life piece of shit. Everyone in the jury and the judge saw it too. Safe to say he went away. The question could go two ways. First, how am I going to defend this guy on a moral level? And second, legally, what defense am I going to use? The second question comes up all the time. Sometimes the evidence is solid. And it is hard to think of a good defense. Sometimes there isn't a good defense. Just an adequate one. The first question, at least for me, is never an issue. I've defended murderers, rapists, child molesters, wife beaters, and racists. Everyone deserves a defense. No matter how serious the charges. In fact, the more serious the charge, the more they need a defense. I know not everyone can take this position. But I can. Which is part of why I do what I do. Not strictly answering the question, but a few years ago some guy walked into a lawyer's office with a corpse folded into a rug. He asked for advice on how to get rid of the body. He was under the impression that given the partial nature of lawyers, they would not be able to turn him in. The lawyer kept cool. Gave him some tips. Told him he needed to go to the other room because, excuse. Called the police. A few minutes later, they showed up and arrested the guy for murder. I suspect that he had a different lawyer at trial. He shot at the cops while running away from them. Uphill. Smart move. The bullets were assisted by gravity so they went faster. Not a lawyer. But one of my exes was. She said that defending an obviously guilty piece of shit is like being a tour guide. Explain to the client what is happening. And why. And ensure the prosecution follows the rules. Also, keep the client from actively making things worse for themselves. Which happens far too often and benefits nobody. Amazing how many idiots commit crimes and seem honestly ignorant of the potential repercussions. Her job was basically to explain that shit to them. Not necessarily keep them out of jail. Getting half of them to wear a tie and be respectful to the judge was harder than you might think. Then again, she was a cheating who also take all of that with a grain of salt. 2. Representing a guy in his divorce. She claimed he was emotionally and physically abusive. He said it was all a lie. Wife's attorney produced VM he left her where he said he was going to decapitate her. Represented a guy who was caught bringing over a load from Mexico. Claimed he had no idea what he was carrying and had no connection to Drew Gus. When they raided his house they found 12 scales and a shrine to Jesus Malvern, the patron saint of drug smugglers. I just wrapped up a trial clerking for a judge. I am a lawyer, just not the lawyer trying the case. Facts: prison guard allegedly had sex with an inmate with DNA evidence. BTW prison guards can't do that even it is consensual. It is equivalent to grape. The prison guard actually said in a statement to police, "I licked her vag." He was acquitted of all charges. The attorney played off jury nullification and how stupid the defendant would sound on the stand. Spin the DNA too. It was a beautiful piece of lawyering. Not a lawyer, but the kid who shot up my high school, Marshall County. He has admitted why he did it. Where he got the gum from. Everything he did that day. And presumably that he did it. They are still trying a defense somehow. No clue how. Just guessing on how it will go. There was a shooting 20 years ago at a nearby high school, Heath. Killed 3, to his 2. But injured way less. My school had 16 gum injuries. Don't remember what the injuries on the other was. Got life with a chance for parole in 25 years. I'm fairly certain. Since the first parole opportunity will happen the year after my high school shooter's trial. I doubt that will go well. I'm a civil litigator. So this pops up a lot, especially when you're dealing with a breach of contract and my client simply didn't have the money to pay. That isn't really defensible. The more frustrating moments are the ones where you're doing doc review and find something stupid. I had one case, which involved alleged corporate raiding. A relatively tough claim to win because you have to prove some nefarious intent. We didn't get our hands on some C-level executives' texts until relatively late in discovery, and when we did, we found a number of texts making fun of the plaintiff's CEO on the day that my client hired a fair number of his people. That would have played horribly before a jury. There was these several times I had all the evidence I needed to prove the prosecution's narrative didn't check out. But the judge said they weren't admissible. Oh wait. That was when I was playing Phoenix Wright. This guy was an actor and he was accused of murdering someone he worked with. The murder weapon was a spear prop that he used in the show, and there was a picture of him dressed in the suit and helmet he wore for the show and holding the murder weapon as he was heading to the area where the other actor was held just a few minutes before the other actor was killed. Thankfully it turned out that my guy had been drugged with sleeping pills and was only framed to look like the Kriller. The real Kriller had stolen his suit and helmet and purposefully gotten themselves caught on a security camera to make it seem as if my guy had done it. I've posted about this one a few times, but there was a case in Louisiana that is relevant. Basically, Robert McCoy murdered 3 people. His ex-wife's mom, stepdad, and son. The evidence is pretty clear that he did it. Comes close to trial and his lawyer has the tough job of trying to defend him. Lawyer decides pretty early on it is hopeless and he decides he will admit that Robert did it but will suggest he didn't meet the mental state element required for first-degree murder. The goal of this was to get Robert a life sentence instead of a death sentence, which he would get in this case if convicted on first degree. Robert McCoy did not want to admit guilt or to having any mental issues. The lawyer tries to argue this over his client's objections, and in court, the client blurts out his lawyer sold him out. And on the stand says he didn't do it. Isn't mentally ill. And it was the crooked cops, and is ultimately convicted and sentenced to death. The quick story on this is that this goes to the SCOTUS that states it is unconstitutional for your lawyer to not follow the client's stated objective for their defense, and it is sent back for a retrial, which is pending now. So McCoy's new lawyer is tasked with presenting a defense seeking an acquittal when the evidence is pretty clear that he did it, and he will get the death penalty. During an exploratory craniotomy, pathologists misdiagnosed a slow-growing astrocytoma for the very aggressive and terminal glioblastoma multiforme on a kid, who then received extremely aggressive chemotherapy treatment that caused extensive suffering before his death. That one settled. Not a lawyer, but I work at a law firm. My office is next to the conference room. The walls are thin. The client yelled out, "If I tell the truth I'll be ducked," needless to say she hasn't been around anymore. I had a horrible child molestation case as a public defender. The victim was 16. The abuse started when she was 13. And my client considered them to be in a relationship. Despite the fact that this was his girlfriend's daughter. A family friend walked in her giving him head. He was totally unrepentant and said her interview with the advocate for rape victims hurt his feelings because it made it sound like she didn't have a choice. Thankfully he didn't want a trial because a jury would have hung him. I do not miss that job at all. Not a lawyer. But I was working as this lawyer's legal secretary at the time of both cases. 1. Messy probate case between dead man's wife and his business partner. Turns out the boring import-export business he had was a front for some fairly wild fetish and porn site, all consenting adults. We checked. Can't remember all the details. But basically the dead guy never left clear instructions regarding who should inherit either business. And the whole thing had to go to court, but shortly after I left. So no conclusion sadly. 2. Legal aid case where a guy was suing a storage company for damaging his stuff when they cleared his house. It had been repossessed because he didn't pay his mortgage. They said he never paid any money for storage. This was after 8 years. So they'd started selling off valuable pieces to cover the cost of keeping sentimental items. Anyway. Guy finally stops sending his lawyers abusive faxes and gets his day in court. He turned up drunk at 9:40 AM. Called the judge a hunt. Got arrested for contempt of court and automatically lost his case. And all of his items formally became the property of the storage company, who promptly sold the lot. Client then called after the weekend. Called me rich on the phone and then said he'd hired a rival firm to sue us. And was Lewa. She was defending the city a deadbeat. Think Larry Butts from Ace Attorney. Don't remember the details. But what's important was that it involved him getting this one girl pregnant while dating another girl. The girl who was bearing his child was the girlfriend of one of the guys watching the trial. Turns out he was also the head honcho for the drug dealing racket in that city. And the client had no ducking clue. When the client asked my aunt why shit keeps happening to him, my aunt said verbatim, "Stop getting girls pregnant. You asshole." When I was defending a guy against assault and battery charges because he kicked the shit of a guy with his fancy steel-tipped cowboy boots. He showed up for his jury trial wearing the boots. I still won.